Life after the Rams with Colin Gibson.
Welcome to episode 10 of Life After the Rams. Today we're joined by a man whose football journey has taken him from the baseball ground to World Cup glory and now all the way to Atlanta with US soccer. Paul Simpson opens up on his Derby days, the under-20 triumph and the twists that shaped his career. This episode is brought to you in association with RamsTrust, the Derby County Supporters Society, established to promote good governance and fan engagement. They welcome new membership applications from all supporters. Just visit ramstrust.org.uk/membership for further details.
Life after the Rams with Colin Gibson.
Paul, 1992 is when your first association with Derby started, but there's been a bit of water under the bridge, I think it'll be fair to say, in the intervening, I can't even do the maths for that, years.
A lot.
A lot indeed. But as we speak, we find you in Atlanta, Georgia. Tell me more.
Yeah, I'm about 40 minutes outside of downtown Atlanta. We're in a little, it's like a new village called Trilith, and it's where the old Pinewood film studios are, and they've basically converted them all into this new village. But it's got everything here, got a lovely place we're renting, with space for people to come and visit, which we're hoping. We've currently got our youngest Dominic over for a few days. And then there's restaurants and bars and everything. So that's where we're living at the moment. But I got offered a job with the American Soccer Federation. And I'm using the term soccer because it's called the United States Soccer. I still call it football when I'm in the office, and I get funny looks from everybody, but it's still football to me. And I'm over here as the head coach with the under-16 group, which are the 2010 birth years. And I stay with these for the next couple of years to build towards the 2027 World Cup in Qatar. So that's what the challenge is for the next 2 years, and then we'll see what comes after.
How did it come about?
It was an advert that got put out by the LMA, the League Managers Association. They send adverts out for any jobs that are becoming available. And it was something that I just looked at, and myself and Jackie, we've talked about going to America quite a few times over my career, and nothing's ever happened about it. And when this opportunity come up, I'd made the decision after the way that it ended at Carlisle that I didn't want to go back into management. I was seriously considering retiring and just trying to pick up some little part-time roles. And then this came about, so I thought I'd apply for it. I was a bit dubious as to whether it was already a done deal and somebody in the background had been appointed, but I was assured by the technical director here that it wasn't, and to go through the process. So it was, the whole interview process must have took about 2 months all in to do it. There was about 7 or 8 different Zoom calls that I needed to go on, 30 minutes of each, and eventually at the end of it I got offered the job, and then we made the decision to come over and have a look over here and see what it was like. And so myself and Jack came over for about 4 or 5 days, looked around the areas, they spoke to people at the federation, and it just seems like a really good time to be here, because they've got, well, firstly they're building a brand new national training centre about 10 minutes down the road from where we're living. And it is an incredible facility that they're building. It's sort of, I thought I was like the luckiest bloke in the world working at St George's Park and going in there every day. This is like another level, as you'd expect with Americans. So that's really exciting. We move into there at the end of March, beginning of April time. We've then got the Senior World Cup finals in next June. The Olympics are in Los Angeles in 2028. So I'm hoping that I'm going to have a little bit of a role to play, even if it's just some sort of scouting role. To be a part of those will be, hopefully, a brilliant finale to my career.
As you say, it's quite a time to be around the USA, certainly for soccer. God, you've got me saying it now.
It is. It's a brilliant time. They're investing millions of dollars into the new facility. There's a local philanthropist called Arthur W. Blank who is investing really heavily into the National Training Centre. He owns the Atlanta soccer and the NFL team, so he's built a magnificent Mercedes-Benz stadium in Atlanta, a new training facility for Atlanta United. But on top of that, he does a lot of stuff. He's building a hospital for children. He invests a lot of money, and I've never met the guy, but for what he's doing in this area seems absolutely fantastic. And that was the pull for us. We just thought, this is a really good time to come over here. They're trying to build up the development teams over here. They wanted, one of the things they said to me was they wanted me here because of my experience in every level of English football, but also in international football. So I think they've chosen me because I'm an old git and I've got a bit of experience, but I'm enjoying it. It's a really good challenge and something I'm getting stuck into.
As you say, when they build things, they don't do it by halves. I've actually seen that Mercedes Stadium. I flew into Atlanta a year or so ago, and as you're coming in to land at Atlanta Airport, you can see the stadium in the distance. Yeah. And I went to see the Eagles at the State Farm Arena next door, and just went and looked from the outside. And yeah, it's typically USA. What about an involvement then, possibly in the Olympics, possibly in the Senior World Cup?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the World Cup, I think what they've done in the past is all of the head coaches, so the full-time youth national team head coaches, they've all basically been given like a little group of teams, whether it's one particular group, and you then put reports together on what those teams are going to do. Just in case the US come up against them. So I'm actually keeping my fingers crossed that I get given England's group and I can go and scout and watch all the England World Cup games. How it works, I'm not really sure, but it may be that we go and physically watch the games in the stadium, maybe for one or two of the games, and the rest will probably be done on videos. And it'll just be a case of putting a keynote presentation together of what the teams look like, how they build, how they create, how they finish, what sort of defensive setup they've got, any standout players. So it'll be that type of thing, and it sounds really exciting. For the Olympics, I don't really know because I've never been involved in the Olympics or been this close to it, but I would imagine it'll be something similar in that we'll go out and have a look at any teams who the US may come up against. But just to be able to go out and experience it and to be involved in it will be it'd be a really good thing to be into.
So you mentioned they were impressed with your international calibre, and of course, let's not forget, you won the World Cup with the England under-20s? Yeah,
that's right, yeah. Yeah, it was a brilliant thing to do. Something that, when you go into football, you dream of being involved in big games. You want to play in front of big crowds. As an English kid, I dreamt of playing at Wembley. I dreamt of playing for England and dreaming of playing in World Cups. And then you get to the end of your career and think, well, the World Cup's gone then, that's not going to happen. So then to get that opportunity to go with the under-20s was an unbelievable experience, something that'll stay with me for life. And to come away with a medal at the end of it, and like the winner's medal, was just like the icing on the cake. It was a brilliant experience.
What about the players who were involved then? How many have gone on to, I was going to say to make it, but have sort of made their stamp, say, in the senior squad?
In terms of the seniors, there's players who've gone into it, but not sort of really established a definite place. But people like Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Dominic Solanke, Fikayo Tomori, Kyle Walker-Peters, I'm sort of reeling them off, and some of them have played for the national team. Most of them are staying and playing at a good level. John Joe Kenny is playing in the Bundesliga, Kyle Walker-Peters still in the Premier League. Trying to think who else. Freddie Woodman's playing Championship football. Ademola Lookman was with us, and now he just recently was voted African Footballer of the Year. So players were really, really good players. Also top people as well, which is really important, I think, when you're working with development teams. So they've all continue to have a good career, or the 99% have continued to have a good career. It's just a shame that there's not more of them have actually gone and pushed and been regulars in the senior national team.
We know all about Fikayo Tomori, of course, with his season at Derby, part of the team that got to Wembley. Okay, lost to Aston Villa, but you could see even in what I guess was a developing year for him, he was going to be some player.
Oh no, he was. He's such a good athlete. The strange thing is he scored one of the best own goals I've ever seen scored in a game in one of our World Cup games against Guinea. He was on the halfway line and he turned to play a ball back to Dean Henderson in goals. And Dean was way out of his goal and he smashed his pass back, and Dino would have been able to control it if he'd have been in the right position. But Dino was so far out and it went in from the halfway line. So it was a bit of a rude awakening for Fick, that was.
Gone on, of course, to win the Italian titles.
Yeah, no, absolutely brilliant. And you knew that he was going to be a good player. You knew that he had it. He had the mentality, he had the athleticism, and he just needed that opportunity to play. Like with a lot of those Chelsea boys, it's a shame that they weren't able to really go and establish themselves. You know, I worked with people like Dujon Sterling, Reece James, Trevor Chalobah, Mason Mount, and some of them have been able to get through, but there's a lot of Chelsea boys like Fick who ended up having to move on to be able to get that first team opportunity.
Yeah. In the dealings that I had with him, certainly when he was at Derby, again, a very personable person.
Yeah, no, he was. I mean, when I look back at that World Cup group, one of the things that I challenged them to, because when we left, we had no thoughts that they kept telling me they wanted to win it, but our history in the World Cup finals with under-20s was horrendous. We hadn't, I think it was something like 24 years since we'd won a game and 28 years since we'd won consecutive games in the World Cup finals. So they were saying we're going to go and win it, and I'm thinking, okay, well, I like your ambition, but let's be careful. And I challenged them. I said, look, one of the things I want to take out of it, by the end of the tournament, I want everybody to have a different perception of young English footballers, because it wasn't very positive when we went. And that was my proudest thing. And I know it sounds daft because I've got a World Cup winners medal out of it, but the proudest moment for me was how the South Korean hotel staff, how the FIFA representatives, how they all perceived the players, because they were top professionals the way they went about it. And that's what I really wanted to see. I wanted people from the rest of the world to see what I saw, that they were actually good people. So that was brilliant. And Fick was a great example of that. But all of them, they were just real good fellas who came about their business, did it all properly. We got stronger and stronger as the tournament went on, and it just made for sort of a life moment for us.
At one point, did you think, they might be right, we might just do this?
Well, it was funny because when in the group stages, our third game was against South Korea, and the way that the draw was made, it was obviously in South Korea, and it was geared towards the host nation having a nice comfortable route through, and we ended up topping the group and taking South Korea's route. So it meant the majority of our time we stayed at the same hotel in Jeonju, and we didn't have loads of travelling. And when we beat South Korea 1-0 and I looked at the rest of the route to the final, I thought, oh wow, this looks quite nice. We could be, if we can beat the teams, obviously we're in a good position. But the truth is, the first time that I ever talked to the players about winning was in my final messages for the final. I just said to them, look, we've come this far, why don't we go and win it? And I never talked about winning at any point with them, because with England, it was about development. With that group, it was about the development. So I avoided talking about winning until that morning in fact, it was the afternoon of the final. It was like 2.5 hours before kickoff. I just said, look, we're here now. Why don't we go and win it? And thankfully we did.
Were you aware that the interest in the under-20s was building back home as the tournament went along?
Yeah, it became clear to me, because I always remember the first game we played against Argentina, which was a big game anyway, because England Argentina at any level there's a big rivalry. Even though our players they were so young, they didn't even know about the Falklands War. They didn't, it wasn't, they weren't aware of why the rivalry. Everybody just thought it was because of Maradona's hand of God, which obviously didn't help either. But before the first game, I went into the press conference and there was literally two people sitting there to ask questions. That was it, nobody. And then as we got to the quarter-final stage, there was maybe 20 or 30 people. And then we got to the semis, and suddenly I'm doing live pieces down the line to Sky News and to Five Live, and everybody started to come on board. And the last press conference, there was a lot more than just two people in it. So we knew that the interest was getting there, and it just kept building and building. And I think it was only the final that got shown on TV over in England. But it was, again, that was a real crazy thing, because Jackie was at home in Derbyshire when we had our house in Hollington. So she was at home with some friends watching early in the morning. Jake and his wife Alice had gone over to New York because Dominic was on Broadway in New York. So he was about to perform that night. So they were in New York, and as soon as we qualified for the final, Joe booked his flight and he flew over to South Korea. So on the pitch, there was me and Joe doing a FaceTime call to Hollington for Jack and all the Derbyshire friends, and Jake, Dominic and Alice were on FaceTime in New York. So we had this three-way FaceTime going around the world, which was just incredible. So a brilliant time. And Jake actually said if Carlsberg made days, it'd be this. My dad wins the World Cup and I watched my brother on Broadway for the first time. So it was a good day.
Not one to be forgotten. All right, let's go back over 30 years. And you've already had a career with Man City, with Oxford, but then in February 1992, Derby County come calling. Do you remember it?
I do. It was crazy. It was a strange time because I'd gone out of contract the previous summer, and I'd heard that Derby County and Arthur Cox were interested in me. But it was at the time where if you came out of contract, you weren't on a Bosman. The club still held your registration, and if they couldn't agree a fee, it went to a tribunal. So Oxford were asking for silly money for me, and I knew nobody was going to pay it. So basically, I got priced out of an opportunity to move at that point. But then we had the scenario where Robert Maxwell disappeared off his boat out in the sea somewhere, or whatever happened. Don't think we've ever found the truth. And basically at Oxford, we were told that if somebody didn't get sold within 10 days, nobody was going to be paid the wages. So it was a bit of a nervy time, really. And then I got a phone call on a Wednesday morning. We were off from Brian Horton, and he just said, "Look, I need you to come into the club, Simo." He said, "We've had a bid for you that's been accepted, and come in and I'll have a chat to you." So I said to him, "Where is it? Can you tell me where I'm going?" He said, "No, I can't at the moment. Just come in and I'll explain when you get in." So we lived about half an hour away from the old manor ground. So I left Jackie and two boys, went into the manor, and I sat for ages because at the time Notts County had offered the same money for me. So Notts County and Derby were in, and Brian Horton was basically trying to get a bit more money out of them, or trying to decide whether he wanted me to go. And eventually he came and said, "Look, it's Derby County." And I spoke to Arthur on the phone in Brian's office, and he just said, "Look, come up. There's not going to be any issues. Come and get up here and see if we can agree a deal." So I said, "Well, it's a Wednesday. Do I need to bring my boots with me?" And he said, "Well, we have a game on Saturday. Would you want to play?" I said, "Well, yeah, obviously I would." He said, "Well, why wouldn't you bring your boots?" I said, "Well, I don't know if we're going to agree terms." He went, "Trust me, son, we'll agree terms." He said, "Just bring your boots with you." So I left home that morning, and we'd lived in the house together with the boys for 3 years in Oxford. And I still to this day, I've never set foot back into that house again. I came up to Derby, agreed the deal, and got put into Bredsall Priory. So I lived in Bredsall Priory. Jackie sold the house in Oxfordshire, and the family came up, and that was it. We just got on with life in Derby.
My word, that's sort of the human side of a football transfer. That's it. Bring your boots. Yeah. You're playing Saturday. Don't worry about it, and yeah, you'll never see this house again. No time to say
That's
goodbye.
exactly, yeah, that's how it happened, and got absolutely no regrets. I wish I could have gone back to see my apple trees that we'd planted in the garden, but thankfully, a year or two later, one of the neighbours died, and her partner, her husband Richard, they sent me a box of the apples that had come hanging over the wall. So I did get some apples eventually, but no, it was how it worked. That's how it happened, and people don't believe that's how it happens, but it literally does, or it did in those days. And nowadays, I'm not sure that players move as frequently as we used to in those days.
Effectively, you had no say in the matter.
Well, I could have turned it down, but obviously I wanted to go. I was, I was looking to try and play at highest level I possibly could, and I felt that moving to Derby it was at the time when Lionel Pickering was spending the money. He'd just bought Marco Gabbiadini, and there was talk that there was a lot of other players coming in. And I just looked at Derby as being, although we were in the same league as Oxford United, I just felt Derby was a club that had a real chance to go and get to the top level, and that's what I wanted to do.
Scored on your debut.
Yeah, Leicester away. Yeah, it was a good one, and it's strange because at the time I didn't realise what the rivalry was between Derby and Leicester. So to go and score and get a win that day was brilliant for us, and it was the start of. Well, I loved my time at Derby. Although there was frustrating times for me, I absolutely loved my time at Derby. It's a brilliant part of my career.
First taste of playoffs at the end of that season. I mean, again, it's one of these things in football, twists and turns. You were so close to automatic promotion, having sort of not really been anywhere near it, but you put this amazing run together. But in the end, you had to settle for playoffs against a Blackburn team who'd been streets ahead at the top of the table. In fact, they beat Derby comfortably at Ewood, I think in the February time, but then slipped away. You get drawn together, and they only qualified just on the final day of the season. You 2-0 up after 20 minutes at Ewood Park. What do you do, stick or twist?
No, that was the frustrating part. I'd say, I don't remember the timings of the goals, but there was a period either side of half time that killed us, and we absolutely blew it in that period. And the thing, we had an unbelievable group of individual players. We had some real good, talented players, but we weren't a team. We were grinding out results. We had somebody like Geraint Williams, George in the middle of midfield. He basically ran it on the pitch. His knowledge, his experience was absolutely outstanding. But there was no real team togetherness. There was no real tactics that we had. Arthur's way was select a group of good players and send them out to play. So when it went well, it went really well. When it didn't go so well, we didn't really have anything to fall back on, and that was a bit of a problem. Although we did have good players, he certainly put a really good, strong group of players together. We just weren't knowledgeable enough and enough game nous, certainly not the level of Blackburn's game nous with the players they had to be able to come through in the end.
From the group of players that were around at that time, and obviously it did change the following season, the likes of Craig Short and Darren Wassell and so on came into the team. But of those players that were around, were they a group that you say there maybe wasn't necessarily the team ethic there, but they seemed to be an interesting group, shall we say?
Yeah, there were. I walked into the dressing room and there were a good group of players. Some of the lads who we had there were excellent. We had senior players like Gary Micklewhite and Ted McMinn, Ian Ormonroyd, Phil G. Good players who've done a real good job. George Williams in midfield, Mark Patterson, Mickey Forsyth. We had a really good group, and then Marco came in, me and Steve Sutton came the same time, and Sutty took over when Schultz decided to go into management at Plymouth. So it was a real mix. But what I found, and I had an inkling at the time, but it's only when you look back, there was a bit of a split because of new players coming in and rumours about what the new players were earning, which were not true. And suddenly the players who were already in the dressing room, there was a little bit of animosity around. But as I say, when George was in the group, he didn't allow it to get to a bad level. Unfortunately, George then left to go to Ipswich, and there was nobody in there to really control that. So there was a strange atmosphere, especially when all of the newer players, the likes of Was came in, Gary Charles, Mark Pembridge, Kitson, Johnson, these sort of lads. There was a strange feeling in the group at that point.
So there was that change of players, and then there was the change of manager. Arthur Cox went, his assistant Roy McFarland took over. Nothing really happened first season, but the second season, again, into the playoffs. And this time you were the ones really coming from the outside, chasing the pack. We always knew the group had got talent. And when you faced Millwall over two legs, boy, did it show.
Yeah, no, we again, really talented group of players. You know, the group had been put together by sort of finished off with Roy. But to be honest with you, Roy taking over, or rather Arthur leaving, was great for me with my Derby career, because for whatever reason, it had just hit a brick wall with Arthur, and he'd lost faith in me and I wasn't getting involved. So Roy taking over got me back involved. So I was delighted with that. But I say, we had good players. You know, you look at the individuals, the forward line of you know, myself one side, Tommy Johnson, Marco Gabbiadini, Paul Kitson, midfield players with Paul Williams and Mark Pembridge, Craig Short at the back. We had such a good squad of players. And like you said, the Millwall game, we murdered them over the two legs, really did. But then we just fell short, lack of experience again, and you know, let ourselves down at Wembley really in what was a huge game. And unfortunately for the club, that was the closest we got in that with that group of players, because then the following year we fell short and Roy ended up leaving, Roy and Alan Durban. But then that was the change. Jim Smith coming in, and him wheeling and dealing and understanding what was needed to get out of the league, not just to have a good group of players, but understanding what type of players were needed. And that, alongside Steve McLaren with his coaching, was what changed the whole face of the football club, really.
Nearly was the end of your Derby career at that moment, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. It was nearly finishing. I mean, I think I was coming out of contract, but Jim kept me. Getting to the Premier League was brilliant. You know, that was fantastic in Jim's first season. Even though, you know, the change of system that changed the results for us meant I was out of it, but Jim always had me involved. And I think as the season went on, I got back in the team towards the end, and I ended up playing quite a lot of games, you know, probably 20 to 30 games that season, scoring. I don't know the exact figure, but I was in double figures for that season to get promoted. But then once we were in the Premier League, Jim had made his mind up I wasn't a Premier League player, and that eventually led to me having to leave the club.
Just on the promotion season, over the Easter weekend, key time always in football, and that's really when you made your mark.
Yeah, I think it was the first game, Oldham away, I think,
Yep.
when I scored a penalty. And then the Monday game, I think I got a hat-trick against Tranmere. And it was interesting because the game that changed our shape was Tranmere away, when they battered us 5-0. And Jim decided to go to a sweeper system with Igor in the middle. So that was sort of a sweet revenge for us to turn them over on Easter Monday, and I obviously got that hat trick. So yeah, that was a pivotal weekend, because the Oldham game was petering out to a 0-0 draw, and then the penalty came late on, and I managed to tuck it away. So No, it was. I mean, again, all unbelievable memories that you keep for life. To get to the Premier League and to have that promotion game in that final game of the season was just incredible. Or second last game, sorry.
Arthur Cox and Jim Smith. Were there any similarities between the two of them, or were they chalk and cheese?
Similarities. You know something? No, I don't think there was. I think Arthur was such a mysterious bloke. You didn't really know where you stood with him. I mean, the time where he lost faith in me, and for me, the turning point was we played Sunderland at home in a game on the baseball ground where the pitch was waterlogged. It was dreadful. I'd had a really good start to the season. I'd scored, I was leading goal scorer with double figures at this point. We'd played Arsenal in the cup and drew at home where I'd scored, had a one disallowed, and we took it to a replay down to Arsenal. And on the Saturday before the replayed game, we were playing Sunderland at home, and a ball got rolled across to me. And as I went to side foot it to try and score, it dragged in a puddle in the 18-yard box. And instead of me making a real clean contact with the middle of my instep, it came off my heel and went wide. So I can't remember if we drew the game or lost it, but Arthur came in at the end and slaughtered everybody, said, that's it, I've put up with people for too long, I'm not going to be loyal to anybody from now. And I was the only player who got dropped for the Arsenal game, and I was leading goal scorer. So from then, I was completely out of it at that point. And I kept saying to him, listen, Gaffer, I want to play in reserve games. I need to keep ticking over. He's like, no, I wouldn't embarrass you playing in those games. You just keep doing what you're doing. But I never got in. So it was a little bit of a mystery. Whereas with Jim, you knew exactly where you stood. You know, that he told you straight. It was simple as that. When I went to see him in the Premier League season and said, look, Gaffer, why am I not playing? What is it? And he just said, I don't think you're good enough to start in the Premier League. Simple as that. And you're like, oh, okay, fair enough. And you had to accept it. You know, it's one of those things. But he said, while you're here, you will always be on the bench, because I know that if I need to go 4-4-2, I'll put you straight on and I can change it and you'll do a job for us. So he was dead straight with me. So at the time it was quite difficult to accept, but I really respected him for being as honest as he was.
Happened on opening day, didn't it? Came off the bench against Leeds.
Yeah, I did, and scored in that first game. Yeah, so it was, and he was true to his word. If ever he did want to change it, then he'd stick me on. And it was a tricky time because all the regular starters, and it was the start of the Premier League starting to get big money. All of the regular starters' salaries were probably multiplied by 4 or 5 when we got the second season. Because I wasn't a starter, mine stayed the same, but I was on a decent appearance money. And he used to say to me, right, quickly get stripped, I'll stick you on for your appearance money. So I used to get on, and it got me a bit more money into my wages. So he was really good to me, even though, I didn't start many games. Or I started one, Blackburn away, the first game of the second season. The rest of the time I was on the bench.
Sounds like a stupid question. Do you wish you'd have had more time to play at Pride Park when you'd had the baseball ground, which was just unique, but Pride Park was the new beginning?
Yeah, I do wish I'd had more time. I wish I'd have been able to be considered good enough to start a game, or to be given that opportunity to start. But when it became really clear that I wasn't going to start, and the club the truth was the club moved on from me. The club, they brought better players in than I was, so I had to just accept that. But the Pride Park was a brilliant stadium. Seeing it being built and then being part of the opening ceremony, and then going back years later as an assistant and being a part of it was fantastic. But the truth was, I wasn't going to play. I wasn't going to start. And my whole philosophy in football has not really been about money or anything like that. It's been about playing as many games as I possibly could. And I didn't want to be a sub. I wanted to have an opportunity to start. And when the opportunity came to go to Wolves, I knew it was the time to go. Jim again said to me, if you don't go, you'll still be a part of it here. But I wanted more than just being on the bench every week. I wanted to try and push to have a really good chance of starting games.
progressed, you moved on. Eventually, playing does come to an end, and I guess those of us who follow Derby closely enough always felt that maybe some way, somehow, that you would return to Derby. And in September of 2013, so it proved to be the case. Nigel Clough was sacked. Controversial decision, as it turned out to be at the time. Steve McLaren was brought in as head coach. What happened from there?
Again, a really crazy time. I'd kept in touch with Steve, not regularly, but every now and again we'd have a text message, or if I bumped into him, we'd see him. And it was a Sunday, and I was sitting at home. We'd moved to Stockport. We were in Marple Bridge then, and I was sitting at home one Sunday night, and the phone rung, and it came up with Macca on it, and I'm like, the bloody hell does he want on a Sunday night? Not spoke to him for ages, and he's chatting away, saying, "Listen, I've had a phone call today. Derby County have sacked Nigel Clough, and they've asked me to go and meet them tomorrow." And we're chatting away for 5 or 10 minutes, and I went, "Steve, can I just ask you, why are you telling me all this?" He went, "Oh, right, did I not say?" He said, "I want you to come in as my assistant." I was like, bloody hell, right, when do we start? And he said, "I'm going in tomorrow, I'll give you a call." So probably about lunchtime, he said, "Can you be over in Derby at 4 o'clock? I went, "You bet I can." I said, "It's about an hour and a half. I'll get on my way now." So he said, so as I was driving over there, I'm thinking, "Oh, we've never even talked about a contract here. I don't even know what I'm coming in for here." So he rung me, and he as I was driving over, he said, "Have you got an agent?" I said, "No, not at all." He said, "Well, how do you want to do your contract?" He said, "Do you want me to just sort it?" I said, "Well, are you going to stitch me up?" And he went, "Not at all, no." He said, I'll get what I can." I said, "Right, well, I'll be signing it then. So no, there's no need for any discussion. Certainly don't need an agent." And I got over there, and then it was me, Steve, and Eric Steele stood there, and I was like, wow, this is an interesting scenario. And again, that was it. It just took off from that point.
It flew, didn't it?
Oh, it's crazy. So I can't remember how it happened, whether we did the press conference on the Monday or the Tuesday, but it was Ipswich at home on the Tuesday night. And Steve said, "We're not going to be involved in it. We're going to be at the game and we'll watch it, but we're not going to be working." And the way that the game started, we were sitting in a row in the director's box, and I forget out with the order. I think it was like Steve, Sam Rush, Andy Appleby, me, and Steely. And I'm watching these goals going in, thinking, wow, this is horrendous. And I kept looking across at Steve, thinking, any chance? You know what you're thinking? And he didn't move. So I just said to Sam, said, "Listen, do you mind if I just sit next to Steve a minute?" And he said, yeah, go on. So I moved across, and I went, "What are you thinking?" And he said, "It's horrible, isn't it?" I said, "I don't want to sit through this for the rest of the game." I said, "You're going to have to do something, aren't you?" He said, "I can't." I said, "Oh, no, you can. You can." He said, "Well, what can I do?" I said, "You can change it. You can go down at half time." He said, I said, "But you're not allowed to go in the technical area. You can only be in the background." And he went, "Right, okay." He said, "Well, what are you thinking?" So we talked about what changes and what we should do. I said, "But you need to go and do it at half time. You need to start now. We can't wait any longer." So I said, "But I think I need to go and explain to Wass what's going to happen, because he's going to panic." So he said, "Right, go and do that." So I went down to the back of the dugout, and I just explained to Wass what was happening. I shouted for somebody, and he came into the tunnel area, just explained what was going to happen, and he was like, "Right, no problem at all." And that was it. Steve went in, and it's funny, sometimes things happen like that. They fall into your lap as a manager, as a head coach. When we scored straight away after half time, and then you get back and we draw in the game, people go, bloody hell, what a miracle that was. And suddenly you've got the players eating out the palm of your hand, and that's what Steve had because of that. And then because of what happened then, I think if I remember rightly, we beat Leeds on the Saturday at home, and we'd had a dreadful record against Leeds. So straight away, you've got the players going off on an international break thinking, bloody hell, the manager's come in, and we've gone from losing 3-0 to getting a draw out of a game and then beating Leeds at home. You know, things could really happen. And from there, it just all took off, and it was absolutely fantastic time to be involved. Unfortunately, the way it all ended. You know, he had a plan. When he explained to me and Steely what he wanted, it was like this season is about building the culture. The next season's about getting the players that we want. The following season's when we're going to go for it. And we never got that opportunity to go for it, unfortunately, because of the way that things turned out.
We all know about Wembley and Bobby Zamora and the like. With the benefit of hindsight, any regrets on what happened in the final? The team, there's always the talk about should Craig Bryson have started, having been such a key part of that season. So it's easy with hindsight.
Yeah, it is easy. I mean, we were so blessed there because we had Craig Bryson, who had an incredible season, but I think he'd had an injury before the final or whatever it was, and that's where there was a bit of debate as to who. We had Will Hughes, who was an incredible football player, and Jeff Hendrick, who gave us energy and strength and a good footballing ability as well. So we had good players there. You know, that was the strange thing about it, and the system that Steve had set up with Eusty playing as that what Steve used to call as the controller, sitting in front of the back four, and George Thorne came in to do that role as well. We had an abundance of midfield players. So, I mean, most of our debates that we used to have, myself, Steve and Steely, was around which were the midfield three that we were going to play, because we had such good players. But for the final, Steve made that decision that it wasn't going to be Bryce playing. And maybe, but it's ifs and buts, maybe Bryce's energy and his running power out on a pitch like Wembley might have been different, but it wasn't that. We were a free scoring team in that league. You know, we were breaking records for the number of goals we scored, but all of our forward players couldn't have hit a bloody barn door on that particular day at Wembley, and ultimately that's why we suffered.
The following season, as you said, there was this thing that, right, you'll kick on, you'll move on, but it just didn't happen. And then the story started about Newcastle wants Steve McClaren. Newcastle wants Steve McClaren. Steve McClaren wants to go to Newcastle. Was it a distraction?
Well, this is, maybe I was naive, but it wasn't a distraction to me. The first time the story came out, I always remember, because my mum didn't ring me on a morning. I would speak to my mum in Carlisle on an evening or whatever, a couple of times a week, and she rung me one morning and said, "Oh, you're in the papers, aren't you?" I said, "Am I? What for?" And she said, "Oh, you're going to Newcastle." I went, "Am I? Well, I don't know anything about it." She said, "Oh, yeah, the papers are saying that they want Steve McClaren and you're going to go with him." I was like, "Mum, honestly, I don't know anything about it." So we're going on the Thursday, and they're doing the warm-up, and the fitness coach is running them round. And me and Steve used to just watch them from the middle of the grass at the training ground, Moor Farm. So we're watching them running round. I said to Steve, "Come on then, what's this about Newcastle?" And he went, "What do you mean?" I said, "It must be news, because my mother's just rung me this morning to tell me about it, that we're going." And he went, "No." I said, "Well, there's a truth in it." He went, "Oh no, they've asked Colin, his agent, they've asked Colin about it, but I've told him we've got a job to do here and we're staying here." I said, "Right, so do I need to ask you again about it, or is it put to bed and we're going to finish the job here?" And he said, "We're finishing the job here." So I never asked him about it again, but it kept rumbling along. But my understanding was, we're not going because we're finishing the job here. And the next time that we spoke about it was literally, or the next time we had a proper conversation, the last game of the season, when we lost at home to miss out on the playoffs. And at Pride Park, when we played there, at the back of the changing room was the medical room, and there was a tiny little private room, basically, if the doctor needed to do any private one-to-one stuff. But Steve would go in there straight at half-time and at the end of the game, and he'd gather his thoughts together in the room. And if he was taking a bit too long, I'd go in and say, "Right, what's your problem? What's the debate about? What are you thinking of saying?" And we'd sort of come to an agreement. It went on for ages in this room, and I walked in and I went, "What are you doing?" I said, "Come on, the players are in here waiting for you to come and speak to them." And he said, "We can't go on the back of that." I went, "What do you mean we can't go?" He said, "Well, Newcastle still want us to go. I went, no, I'm not going. No chance. I said, I'm staying here. And he said, well, if I turn it down, we're going to have to commit for the next 3 years here. I went, do it. I said, I want to stay. I'm not going anywhere. So we turned it down. And then obviously the next week he got the sack and I got the sack a little bit further down the line.
Sad end to what had been a great association?
Horrible end. It still upsets me to this day because me and Jackie, we were really good friends with Mel and Sharon. Really good friends, good social friends. We'd known them for 20 odd years. So it hurt, really did hurt. And to lose my association with the club on the back of that. Listen, I understand if a manager gets sacked, I understand the assistant is normally going to get sacked as well because a new manager comes in, and I don't blame Paul Clement as the new manager because he wanted to bring his own staff in, but just do it properly. Make the decision properly. Everybody signs contracts, and you have, however long you've got on the contract, there's a termination period. We all agree it before we start. It's signed before we start. Just honour it. Don't tell lies. Don't make up accusations that are untrue, because it affects you. And I was threatened that my name would be blackballed throughout Derbyshire if I didn't just leave. Like, I hadn't done anything wrong. Yes, we'd failed to get promotion, but that's not illegal. And I hadn't done anything wrong. So yeah, it still does hurt me because it's probably one of the best times of my life being part of Derby County as a player and as an assistant. Brilliant memories, brilliant times, good friends in the area from football and outside of football. And when things like that happen, it actually does hurt, really does.
Time moves on again. You return to Carlisle. You've been to Wembley and it's never quite worked out as you want it to. But this time, finally, you go to Wembley and a winner. Yeah,
I thought it was never going to happen. Like when I think back through my career, my first time I went with City in the full Members' Cup final game, I was so nervous that I didn't enjoy it. And then we went in the Anglo-Italian game and we went the Leicester game. Again, I tried to enjoy it, but the results weren't right. Then I lost with Shrewsbury, lose with Derby against QPR, and you think, Jesus, will I ever get another chance to go to Wembley? So to get there with Carlisle and to win it, oh, wow, in playoffs as well, there's nothing for second place. You don't even get to walk the steps. You don't even get a bar of chocolate for it. You get nothing at all. And you have to stand and be respectful to the winners while everybody's going crazy. And then you just want to slope off the pitch and crawl under a big stone somewhere. So to win it and to be part of it, and with my home city as well, was just a absolutely brilliant feeling. Really was.
But 10 months after that, you returned to Pride Park. It's not been the greatest of seasons for Carlisle. It's been difficult. And you're there observing maybe the rebirth of the football club that you spent so much time with, as you've said, didn't end as you wanted it to end. Nearly went out of business, but David Clowes came in, took it over, brought Paul Warne in, and he did what Arthur Cox had done in the mid-1980s, taken 2 years and got them out of the third division. Yeah, you were on the receiving end that day, but for a club like Derby, it had to be done, didn't it? And as I say, it was the start of another rebirth.
Yeah, I mean, from the moment that David Clowes took over, you could tell that everybody was coming back on board with the football club, which is what happened when Steve went in, and everybody started to come back on board. And really, Mel Morris getting involved in the club should have been the start of the club absolutely taking off. And I don't know the full story behind what happened and where all the money went. I've no idea. But when David Clowes came in, you could see that the club was starting to come back. And coming on that day, I've got to say, at the start of the season, when the fixture list come out, I knew we were going to have a tough season as Carlisle. And I looked at that game and I thought, oh, Jesus Christ, I hope we don't need a result to stay up and Derby need a result to go up. So the fact we were already down, that took that side of it away. But it's strange because I love the football club, Derby, but I went there to try and spoil their day. And unfortunately, when you concede early on like we did, it just took off. But it reminded me, pulling up at the stadium in the coach, reminded me what a bloody big football club Derby is and what the support is and the atmosphere inside the ground and everything. It's a proper football club. That's how I always describe it. It's a proper footballing city. It's a proper football club. Fans are fanatical about it, and that day sort of reminded me, if I needed a reminder, how big a thing it was for the club to get back into the Championship.
Simo, thanks. Coming up in episode 11, the one and only Bobby Davison. If you've missed any of our conversations so far, from the likes of Phil G, Eric Steele, Craig Bryson, Ron McFarlane or Colin Todd, they're available wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks to RamsTrust and to 7 Restaurant and Café Bar in Derby for supporting us. Located on Derby's Pride Park, 7 is the leading destination for all-day dining, artisan coffee and handcrafted cocktails. With a focus on quality, seasonal ingredients and a welcoming atmosphere, 7 is where the community comes together to relax, connect and celebrate.
Life After the Rams is a Back Pass production.